You've experienced this before, even if you've never been able to give it a name. At first, everything seemed right. There were no fights, no glaring mistakes, no direct rejection. But, at some point, hard to pinpoint, something changed. The way she responded, the timing, the tone, the presence. It wasn't a sudden break. It was a slow, almost polite slip. And the most confusing thing, you couldn't pinpoint where you'd gone wrong. You were there, present, attentive, polite, available, doing exactly what they always said a right guy should do. And yet you felt she was slipping away, not physically, not yet, but emotionally, yes. As if the connection was losing its vibrancy, as if the interest was slowly draining away, silently. And this affects you in a specific way, because you can't fight something you can't see. You start reviewing old conversations, messages, audio recordings. You remember every detail, searching for the exact moment when everything changed. But you can't find it. You only find a strange pattern. The more you tried to be present, the more distant she seemed to become. Then, the internal conflict arises. Were you too good? Or perhaps it simply wasn't enough. You start to adjust, to measure your words, to respond too quickly, to show more, to ensure without realizing it that she never feels your absence. All of this seems logical. It seems mature. It seems right. But deep down, something starts to bother you. A feeling that's hard to explain, as if you were always one step behind, trying to hold back something that used to flow on its own. The curious thing is that there's no explicit rejection. She doesn't say she's lost interest. She just changes. And this change creates a silent void, a space where there was once lightness, where you once felt chosen, now you feel tolerated. And that hurts more than a no. You realize that the conversation no longer flows on its own, that the enthusiasm comes more from you than from her, that the genuine sparkle in her eyes is appearing less and less. And the most frustrating thing, you haven't done anything wrong, at least not in the obvious way. That's where the confusion sets in, because you've been taught to believe that attention brings people closer, that presence strengthens, that availability creates connection. So why exactly, when you become more consistent, does something start to get lost? Perhaps it's not interest in you as a person that's disappearing. Perhaps it's something more subtle, more invisible, something that isn't lost all at once, but dissolves. You feel that at some point you stopped being someone she wanted to discover and became someone totally predictable. And predictability brings calm, security, stability, but not necessarily that uncontrollable feeling of butterflies in your stomach. That feeling that can't be explained, but is felt. You don't notice it at the time, because it seems right. It seems kind. It seems mature. Only later, when her interest cools for no apparent reason, does the discomfort appear. That question that keeps nagging without a clear answer, how did something that seemed so right start to go so wrong? And perhaps the most uncomfortable part is this: you didn't lose her for lack of trying. It may have been exactly the opposite. Something in the dynamic changed, something that doesn't involve words nor isolated actions, but an energy that transformed without you noticing. You feel there's something there, a missing piece, an explanation that would finally make sense of it all. You still can't see it clearly, but you feel it, because deep down it explains a pattern that has always repeated itself, and that you never knew how to name. And what you haven't realized yet is that it wasn't what you did. It was where you started acting from. In the beginning, you weren't trying to conquer. You were simply being. You spoke without calculating. You joked without fear. You didn't need to prove anything. There was lightness, a certain detachment, a feeling that if it worked out, great, and if it didn't, you'd be fine. This energy wasn't planned. It simply existed. And that's exactly what creates effortless attraction. But little by little, something changes inside you. Not because she asked for it, not because there was a direct demand. It changes because you start to care more about the outcome than the moment. You start wanting to maintain interest, to sustain the atmosphere, to avoid anything that could spoil what is going well. And without realizing it, you exchange expression for strategy. You start measuring your words, thinking twice before answering, adjusting your tone, always being available, not because you want to be, but because you fear silence. And this fear doesn't need to be verbalized. It appears in the rhythm, in the rush, in the excessive constancy, in the absence of space. And space, however contradictory it may seem, is where desire breathes. She senses the change before she understands it, because attraction isn't logic, it's perception, it's feeling. When you start acting to please her, something in her relaxes too much. And when everything relaxes, the tension disappears, the risk vanishes, the curiosity diminishes, not because you've become worse, but because you've become predictable, totally available, emotionally guaranteed. And when someone feels they can't lose you, something subtle happens. The perceived value drops. Not consciously, not as a moral judgment, but as an emotional response. You become too secure, and extreme security calms. But it doesn't provoke, it doesn't pull, it doesn't call, it doesn't keep desire alive for very long. This is where many men go wrong, because they keep doing more of what no longer works. More attention, more presence, more effort, thinking the problem is quantity, when in reality it's energy. The energy of someone who isn't dependent, of someone who has their own direction, of someone who doesn't mold their behavior to be chosen, but lives as someone who has already chosen themselves. Women feel this, not because they analyze it, but because they react. They connect with the feeling of challenge, with the idea that you have a life, limits, choices, with the perception that being with you is an option, not a guaranteed certainty. Desire is born in this uncertain space, where there is a real possibility of loss. When you try to hold on to someone, even silently, you communicate that you need them more than they do, and that reverses the dynamic. The game changes. The attraction starts to slip through your fingers, not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring too much about their response and less about who you are in the process. Perhaps now some things are starting to make sense. Maybe you're remembering specific moments, small changes, feelings you never knew how to explain. And if this touched something inside you, record it. Not as a request, but as a milestone. Write something simple, something true. It could be, I understand, or enough, or I'm changing from now on. Because when you take a stand, even in just a few words, something inside you begins to reorganize itself, and this will become even clearer.